Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode number 7 of Life, Love, God, the Story of a Soul Traveler, written by Norman Paulsen, who was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. As we start this chapter, Norman is 10 years old now, and he's taking his first major trip, a train ride to San Francisco with his father Charles. And because Charles was blind, and Norm and Charles was returning to his school in Oakland, he was not as familiar with the train and the ferry and the school as he had been when he was a young man, and so Charles allowed Norman to be his eyes. But Norm writes that he was compelled to develop what has been termed a cosmic sense, and he's talking about his father here, which allowed him to receive and understand knowledge unattainable by normal senses. For instance, Charles could see walls. He knew when there was a puddle of water. He could hear water. He could drive a car several blocks with being blind. So his powers, his cosmic sense, were very high, and he was very open about explaining that he got this from spirit, this special power that he had. In his later years, Charles explained to an adult Norman his ability to go places without ever leaving his room. So what he was talking about here was his room at the School for the Deaf and Blind in Oakland, and Charles was drawn to the sounds of the tall ships in the San Francisco Bay. And when he had taken the ferry, he could hear the sound of the waves and the boat lifting up and down in the water. He could hear the furling and unfurling of the sails, and he loved that sound. And so he had found a way to lay on his bed in his room at the school and basically travel to wherever he wanted to travel. And so he could go in his spiritual form to the harbor and hear and feel and possibly even see the boats. So he explained to Norman, he said, well, as the years went by, your old dad learned how to go anyway, eyes or no eyes. He said, writing on the life within, I was able to travel at times anywhere I wished. So Charles even explained to an adult Norman that he had always watched over him, and wherever Norman was, whether he was at sea or whether he was with Yogananda or in Santa Barbara, Charles was able to watch over him with these extraordinary skills that he'd developed. So we refer to the ability to see and experience something beyond our physical location. We call that astral projection. And the idea here is that we are a physical body, but we're also a spiritual or astral body. And that astral body has the ability to leave our physical body, still connected though by a thread, but travel anywhere at any time. And even though this skill is fascinating and a lot of people are attracted to it, it's not something we need to learn to develop or practice. We have our job. But this often happens naturally without practice. In my own experience, astral projection has been found to have some very interesting qualities. For instance, when you are experiencing astral projection, you have the ability to see not only forward as if you were looking through your physical eyes, but in all directions at the same time. Additionally, you have the ability to go somewhere instantly with just a thought. So many advanced souls have experienced this, including Brother Norm. We have a Sunburst brother, Heiko, who came to live at Sunburst when he was a young boy, and he had an experience with Norm and this astral projection. Heiko recalls, one morning my phone rang and Norm said, Heiko, I want you to go to the ranch right away and go up to the mesa. Spirit showed me that one of the gates is open. And the bulls, which were in the pasture, were making their way to the gate and heading down to where the cows were. So Heiko said, Norm, how do you know this? Well, in my inner vision, I was flying over there and I saw it. So I'm sure Heiko was shocked when he heard this, but he got dressed and he drove to the ranch, and sure enough, the gate was open and the bulls were already about 50 feet away from going through the gate and mingling with the cows. Norm showed up too a few minutes later in his big Suburban. He had a big smile on his face and he said, God wants to be a cowboy too. So, to the spiritually adept, astral projection is just a scratch on the surface when you consider something else, and that's called bilocation. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda records an amazing story of his guru, Sri Yukteswar. Yogananda and his friend Dijan were at college, and each day after they left school, they would walk to the ashram and meet with their guru. But on this particular day, they walked to the ashram, and one of the devotees that was there told them that their guru had gone to Calcutta. And so the next day, Yogananda received a postcard from his guru, and it said, I shall leave Calcutta Wednesday morning. Please meet the 9 o'clock train at the Serampore station. So Wednesday came around, and 8:30 that morning, Yogananda received a telepathic message from Sri Yukteswar saying that he was delayed and not to meet the 9 o'clock train. And he tried to tell his friend Dijan, that he'd received this telepathic message from his guru, and Dijan just basically said, I'm going to go. He told us 9 o'clock. I'm going to go and meet it at 9 o'clock. So he went to the station anyway, and later came back deflated because he waited for the 9 o'clock train, the 9:30 train, and their guru didn't show up. But shortly afterwards, Yogananda sat in his room, and his guru appeared in that room as a clearly materialized form. Yogananda felt the canvas of his shoes. He felt his Swami cloth. And Sri Yukteswar spoke. He said, This is not an apparition, but my flesh and blood form. I have been divinely commanded to give you this experience, rare to achieve on earth. Meet me at the station at the 10 o'clock train. So, not only was Sri Yukteswar able to send telepathic messages, but he was able to project his astral body and clothe it temporarily in a flesh and blood form before his disciple, Yogananda, and then basically disappear or vanish and still be back in Calcutta. This is called bilocation, and it was a very advanced form of astral projection. So it's 1939 in this chapter. Charles is running for U.S. Congress in the 10th Congressional District, and at the same time, Norm's mother, Eileen, is running again for State Assembly. Norm writes here that his mom was working in Santa Barbara, so she must have been living down there as far as I can tell, because in those days, a trip from Lompoc to Santa Barbara took nearly 5 or 6 hours. Norm sensed a growing wedge of separation between his father and mother, so he was starting to be somewhat of an empath of people's feelings and realizing that something was happening between his parents. One of the purposes of this trip to San Francisco, though, was to have Charlie's tailor create a new suit for Norman. So you see in the picture here, there's Norm's first suit, and he's standing proudly next to his father, Charles. So as Charles and Norman boarded the ferry for Oakland, Norman looked over and he saw this island with big buildings on it. And he said to his father, "What is that island over there?" And Charles said, "Well, that's Alcatraz. It's a prison. people who have broken the law live there and must stay there the rest of their lives. The thought of being imprisoned was frightening to Norm. As he extended his awareness through the bleak walls of the prison, he was filled with a sense of deep despair and loneliness, and was able to feel the thoughts of the prisoners. So we see at this time, at 10 years of age, Norm was developing his awareness and consciousness to the point of being able to feel what others were feeling. As the ferry proceeded across the bay, Norman saw the ships as they passed and was reminded of his father's stories about the Golden Dawn, the big tall ship, the giant sailing ship of his dad's imagination, where he'd tell stories of Captain Norman and his friends. Well, Norm on this trip was shown images of his own future, and he saw familiar faces saying to him, "We're all here, Norman. We are coming. Just wait." That was a foreshadowing, because years later, Norman would actually sail out of that same bay, San Francisco Bay, on the tall ship, the Golden Dawn, with his friends that he had seen in that vision that day. So the last thing I want to talk about in this chapter is this essay at the end of the chapter called, it's got a title, but it's from something called The Traveler. Now, Charles in his later years lived in San Luis Obispo, and he tuned pianos, he played concerts, he taught at the local Buddhist center, but he also had a radio show called The Traveler. And he wrote, well, actually he spoke these words and later it was put down in writing. But Charles said, "He who is found and who has resolved to tread the blessed path homeward stands unshakable and unmoved and guided and guarded by the mighty power of the holy Dharma." So when we talk about Dharma, a very simple definition would be your path. The Sunburst path, our path, is basically laid out by the 12 virtues and the eightfold path of living, of conscious living. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about being guided and guarded by the holy Dharma. It's the beliefs, it's the teachings. And that would also include the teachings of Brother Norm and the teachings of Yogananda and all those others within our line of gurus. He continues, "Such a one shall enter the heart of nirvana, where he shall know and understand the true meaning of all that has been, now is, and ever shall be." So nirvana is used a lot, and it's used very commonly in society today. It does not refer to a rock band from Seattle. Sorry. Nirvana as a word has been around for years. It's considered to be of Buddhist in origin, and what it crudely translates as is bliss. However, it's way more than that. So if we were to talk about nirvana in terms of our path, nirvana is freedom. It's freedom from karma, it's freedom from your ego, and it's freedom from having to incarnate again because you have reached the pinnacle of your spiritual path. The promise here that Charlie made, and it tells us that he really understood this very well, "To such a one all shall be given, nothing shall be withheld." Charles understood well the path to freedom, and understood that his son Norman, even though he was 10 years old, was firmly on that path. So I want to encourage you to actually read this chapter. This has been a short podcast, but we've gone over the meat in this chapter. I would ask you to begin leaving comments on our podcasts, of course if they're positive, as well as subscribing to our YouTube channel. In preparation for next month, please read and study Chapter 7, Growing Up. And I will look forward to join you next month. Have a great month. Take care.